Well, good morning, everybody. It's our session for the week, and we are working on these beautiful fall foliage maple colors that are just absolutely brilliant. So, I want to get into this today. And, the first thing I want to share with you is, we're making a big color change. We've been working in greens so far. And what I want you to think about is that, we're still going to use the same principles that we've been using about finding the silhouette, establishing the silhouette and then chasing the values. Same thing's going to apply here. We're just changing our colors. Okay, so instead of laying in greens and coming back in with darker greens and bluish greens, we're going to be laying in some oranges and yellows and coming back in with some dark sienna colors, and there's some greenish tints in there, but there's sort of that brownish green, and of course that wonderful misty um, uh, atmospheric effect that we've got on the bottom. We're going to get into that as well. So I thought this would be worth mentioning before we get into the whole lesson. Let me get over to my work area. This actually got mentioned as a question in the Q&A session or event page for this month, and I thought it would be worth addressing right now, especially as we're getting into this particular painting. So it was about Quinacridone Sienna, and is there a good substitute? And so what I wanted to kind of show you, first of all, most folks are used to burnt sienna. I actually have burnt sienna and quinacridone sienna here. So most of us are, we kind of start out with burnt sienna. That's the first thing that we kind of hear about is in terms of a brownish color for our palettes. Very quintessential color out there for everybody to use. And then the quin sienna has come along, and it just gives us something a little bit different. So I want to just real quick, right here at the top of this video, this is sort of like a little extra little something to kind of share with you what these colors are doing. So they are very different from one another. And I use the Quin Sienna as my, in place of burnt sienna. I've just completely replaced that on my palette altogether. And I just want to kind of show you what these, what this looks like, and you'll kind of understand, what the difference is. So I have mentioned it before, maybe in some other lessons, but quinacridone is an optical brightener, and it just really creates a really more vivid color. All right, so if we just kind of look at these two colors to begin with before we even get started, they're very similar. Okay, I've got a shadow there, but the Quin Sienna here on the right, it's got more of a brilliant, more of a vivid tone. It's kind of a reddish brown. It's got kind of a sort of a brick red tone to it, just a little bit. And then the burnt sienna is definitely more our neutral brown that we're used to seeing. Just a little quick comparison of just right out of the tube. Okay. All right, so let's see what happens when we kind of activate these a little bit. So just adding a little bit of water here. I'm getting into this burnt sienna, activating it, and just letting it kind of come out, just so that we can kind of see what that color is going to do. Both of these are Daniel Smith too, by the way. So, the burnt sienna, it's a beautiful color. I mean, it gives us that beautiful, almost, it's not quite a walnut brown, but it's a really beautiful brownish tone that has a reddish tint to it. Very neutral, really nice for landscapes, certainly. And it does like to um, just sort of granulate in the same way that ultramarine blue does, in that it will pool into the little depressions on the paper. Okay, all right. So let's check out the burnt, or excuse me, the quinacridone sienna. Cleaning up my brush here. So I'm just going to activate this in the same way, and already you can start to see there's a little bit more of this brilliant kind of orange tone that likes to come out. All right, so a really big difference in the way that both of these colors sort of work. Even though they really have a similar value, you can see that the Quin Sienna really has a brilliance to it. There's an orange brilliance. And I've mentioned this before, I really like to start with a more vivid tone because I can always add some purples or blues into this Quin Sienna to drop it down more into a traditional burnt sienna if I want to. But if I want to keep more of a brilliant orange, orangish type tone, which is really good for fall foliage. That does help. Now, if I've got, if burnt sienna is all I have, and I'm trying to figure out a way to maybe get something that looks similar to that looks similar using just my burnt sienna, I can get a little bit if I've got some quinacridone gold. I can kind of get that in my burnt sienna to get a little bit more vivid tone. It's not going to give me that orange, but if I come in with a little bit of the opera pink, so opera pink and quinacridone gold mixed with the burnt sienna begins to kind of start to give me a little bit of an orangish tone. In fact, I want to mix that color just from scratch without infusing it into the burnt sienna to begin with. So if I start with a little bit of my pink, a little bit of my quin gold, I kind of start getting this orangey, pinkish tone that's not exactly like quin sienna, but it's pretty darn close, okay? Now, I can sort of infuse this with a little bit um, of just the regular burnt sienna to add a little darker tone to it. If I want to kind of bring some of that in there, you can see I can start to build a little bit of modeling and shading there and bringing some of that burnt sienna, the burnt sienna into this to get a little bit darker. And so that might be a good approach when we start working our way into this painting, because we are going to have some darker values, hiding around inside those orange trees. But to get that orange, using the pink and the quin gold, it's a really good, moderately close substitute to the quin sienna, just in terms of brilliance. Now, if you don't have quin gold, you might be able to use one of your oranges. I still have like permanent orange on my palette, and I can still infuse that with a little bit of hot pink. It gives me a little bit of that orange tone, but it's a little bit more. It's a little cooler. It's not quite as warm as the quin sienna. So basically, the quin sienna is basically giving us an orange. That's what we're going for. So I just want to share that with you right here at the top of the lesson, and just so that you can kind of have a little bit of a clue as to what color changes you might need to make as we're going along through the painting here. All right, so let's get started on the painting.